ability to gain self-awareness of their greatest weakness and develop it into a platform to conceive, believe, and achieve their life goals through empowerment from a foundation of resilience. Now that's kind of wordy. So an easier way of thinking about it is we're developing our leadership from resilience. We're taking the bad things that happen to us and using it. Okay? Not a joke here. You guys have to trust me. The guy came up with this as a genius, but everyone knows it. So, disabled leadership works through this definition through the use of case studies and analysis. We can already tell just from the definition that disabled leadership is not necessarily as much for disabled people as it is a lesson from disabled people. Disabled leadership is about inspiration and opportunity that is provided to everyone and anyone who faces a challenge, whether that be walking or marketing. Either we accept what is, or we learn to use our weakness and we develop it. So if you remember back to the capital D versus the lowercase d, I use that same concept to develop disabled leadership. If you are a disabled leader with a lowercase d, it means you probably got some development to do. And that's okay, as long as you're willing to work on your development. You'll notice I'm wearing a shirt that has a lowercase d on it, and someone on Facebook this morning said, "Why do you have a lowercase d? That's the bad one, right?" It's not the bad one. It is okay to have the lowercase d, but you have to be willing to develop the things that are hampering you and holding you back. Now, if you're a disabled leader with a capital D, that means that you are demonstrating the leadership skills and traits that the rest of us aspire to. So you're doing pretty good on that front. The book will explain in greater detail and greater clarity the difference between the two and identify which disabled leader I'm talking about by either using a bold capitalized D or a lowercase underlined d. So I think that would be pretty clear for you guys. Disabled leadership begins with self-awareness. In this chapter, you will meet a blind girl named Stephanie, who I attended my undergrad with. You will meet a World War II fighter pilot named Rusty, and you'll meet a young dreamer named Julie. Stephanie teaches us that, or Stephanie helps us recognize our weaknesses and figure out how to either accept them, overcome them, or mitigate them. Rusty teaches us that, weaknesses may not always be what we think they are. And then lastly, Julie shows us that, weaknesses are strengths if they are leveraged correctly and appropriately. So those are some things for you to think about. Another thing in this chapter that I share is an actual self-development tool, and I call it self-awareness tool. And it's a little different than other self-awareness tools that you've probably seen in that I do ask you to address your strengths. So you're going to identify your strengths. First thing, let's just get that out of the way. Here's what I'm good at. The difference between this tool and what makes it more meaningful is that then I ask you to validate those remarks. Okay, you say you're good at this, now tell me why you're good at it and show me how. Because a lot of times we say we have strengths, but really when we break it down, we find out it might not be what we think it is. So once you have identified your strengths and validated the strengths, I then ask you to identify your weaknesses. Here's where it gets really different from other self-awareness tools that we've seen in the past. Is at this point, I ask you to find or look for correlations between your strengths and weaknesses. So we have a strength, but we don't realize we're overdoing it, and it's really a weakness. Or maybe we think we have a weakness, but it is a strength. It's actually a strength. Or, you know what? It could be a strength with a little bit of effort. Over the last 10 years, I have taught thousands of senior military leaders and government executives. No matter which course it is that we're teaching, we always start with the same thing: self-awareness. And the concept behind that is that you cannot lead others until you understand how to lead yourself. Make sense? Okay. So I will ask them the first time, say, hey, what are your professional goals? Oh, that's easy. I want to be the boss. Okay, why? Well, you kind of see how we work through that. Okay, so then next I'll ask, what are your personal goals? That is significantly harder. Knowing what we want. And the easy answer I always get is, well, I can be healthier. Well, okay, we can all be healthier, except for me, I'm stuck. Once we've worked through the different goals that they want to work on in the course, then we identify their strengths and their weaknesses. This will not be a surprise to you, but consistently, people, or my students, or people, have a much easier time identifying their weaknesses than their strengths. The reason this is a concern for me is that no matter how easily we identify these weaknesses, time and time again, people would prefer to hone their strengths and continue using the strengths and not work on their weaknesses. And the reason this is a really big issue is because this isn't a leadership development course. You are here literally to develop the weaknesses. So an example would be, you say, oh, well, my weakness is public speaking. And I'll say, okay, great. Tell me what you're going to do right here to work on that. And then never hear from them again during the entire course. So I will push and push and push students to leave their comfort zone and develop that weakness, whatever it may be. And the book is no different. I'm going to push you to leave your comfort zone every step of the way. You bought this book because you were trying to develop a weakness, and by God, that's what we're going to do. So that's kind of how I approach that. In the next section, a fellow wounded warrior named Courtney Clemens will teach you how to use your weakness to build a platform. We call this platform the CBA platform, and CBA stands for conceive, believe, and achieve. You guys heard that in the definition, right? So it's all kind of coming around. It's starting to make sense. I'm not going to share Courtney's story with you. I'm going to make you read the book to get Courtney's story, to see how he used his disability to build a platform to go to Beijing and win a gold medal. If that isn't a hook, I don't know what it is. Right? But if you guys want, I'll share my story. Yes. If you guys want, I'll share my story. Yeah. Screw you guys, I'm going to share it anyways. Okay. So, there's an old Army adage that there are two types of rangers. There's a strong ranger, there's a strong ranger, and there's a smart ranger. I am not kidding when I tell you, well, first of all, it may be hard for you to believe that 15 years ago during my Army days, I was a strong ranger. But I'm not kidding when I tell you that when I was in the Army as an adult, I could barely read. During my time in high school, I read a total of 2 books. Both were by S.E. Hinton. It was The Outsiders, and that was then, This Is Now. And what that should infer to you, that is a lot of my time was spent watching TV for entertainment, and probably not a lot of learning was occurring. And then I incurred my disability. I became deaf. The days of simply rocking the couch for some mind-numbing TV were over. And the reason that really sucks is because now I'm hospitalized for 1.5 years, and there ain't a whole lot else to do. So, now I'm introduced to closed captions. Here's the important idea that I need you to hear and I need you to listen and consider. My disability forced me to overcome my handicap. Think about that. That is the driving force behind this whole thing. Using your disability to overcome your handicap. If I wanted to enjoy TV, I had to learn how to read captions. And it sounds ridiculous now, but at first it was hard. I couldn't keep up with captions. I did not understand. And I found myself after watching for just a few minutes, I was worn out. I was just tired. So, at this point I realized I had 2 options. I had to live in complete isolation or learn to read. I used my greatest weakness as a platform to build my future. So it took 1.5 years or 2 years, but I mastered captions. By this point, I was in college in my undergrad, and I started to realize that I was understanding the assignments my professors were giving much easier. Pretty soon, I found that I was reading during my leisure time for fun on top of my schoolwork. And that seems crazy to some people. You can understand that, right? Next thing you knew, I'd read my way all the way through a PhD. And now I've written a book. And my hope is that you will read Disabled Leadership and figure out how to build your own CBA platform. So I mentioned way back in the beginning that I was empowered by Tina.